بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اتبع هداه إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد فالسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. After looking into what a tawheed means and looking into some of the deviations from the correct tawheed, looking into the evidence and the concepts that stand behind the aqidah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we are now going into what could be considered the first actual introduction to the science of Tawheed. In Arabic, authors often have more than one introduction. Each introduction will have a different purpose. This introduction is not directly related to Tawheed, but it is, you could say, a prerequisite to studying Tawheed. This first introduction, which scholars write, focuses on the general meaning of Tawheed and Iman and the actual physical applicational aspects of the science. That's what we've been studying so far. Here, however, this type of introduction is a little bit different. It's what's often called al-mabadi' al-ashra, or the 10 mabadi' of each field of knowledge. This terminology that scholars have made up basically informs someone of a field of knowledge before they actually start studying it. It shows a person some specific attributes and benefits from studying this field of knowledge, the difference between different fields of knowledge that are reasonably similar or close together, and it makes evident what is part of this knowledge and what isn't. So, for example, if someone was to say what is halal and what is haram, is that part of aqidah? After reading these definitions, you should be able to tell that what you believe is part of aqidah. However, for example, what you buy and sell isn't part of aqidah, that's part of fiqh. So separating different fields of knowledge is one of the purposes of this introduction. These matters are usually discussed before actually diving into the field that you're going to study. In this case, it's Tawheed. Before studying any particular field of knowledge, scholars usually mention these matters, and they are often considered a condition for one to start learning a certain field of knowledge. The student of knowledge learns from such introductions the value of what he's about to learn, in our case the value of Tawheed, how important it is, and the benefits that are gained by studying this field of knowledge. So the benefits we get from learning Tawheed. These introductions usually encourage one to actually undertake studying a certain field of knowledge. For as you will see, it takes effort and time to study. Once you know what you're learning and what you're going to get out of learning, and you start learning a bit, some interesting facts and some information about this field of knowledge, it may encourage you to actually study. These introductions usually include matters such as names of the field of knowledge, boundaries, meaning limitations, what is part of it, what isn't, rulings of studying that field of knowledge, whether it is halal or haram or wajib, books that are authored in this field of knowledge, who authored those books, the first books to be written in the field of knowledge, the last ones, connections between this field of knowledge and others are often discussed. Again, these matters are matters that the scholars made up. They are considered ijtihad. They are not from the Quran or Sunnah, meaning they aren't correct or incorrect. It is up to a scholar to do his best to provide what is beneficial for his students. So there isn't a right way or wrong way to go around actually doing this. In our case, the author, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, started by saying, the many names of the science of Tawheed show its importance and lofty position. In Arabic, the existence of many names for a thing tends to show its honor and importance. For example, there are hundreds of names of important words or important things, such as sword. A sword with which you cut things has hundreds of names in Arabic, as does the word lion, or for example wolf. They have many different names, showing that they are things that Arabs glorified and considered important or great. Obviously, this rule has exceptions. Some things that have many names are not really important or great, such as the woman's period has over 10 names in Arabic, even though it is not considered highly respected. However, the general rule is if a matter has a lot of names in Arabic, it's highly respected. Seeing as the field of Iman, of Tawheed, is related to Allah Azza wa Jal, and therefore is the most honorable field of knowledge, it has a lot of names, obviously. When we say names of Tawheed, we mean words that scholars, trustworthy scholars, have agreed to be names of this Tawheed, and that are nouns that are used to identify this field of knowledge. The author then mentioned some names that were given to this field of knowledge. The author said, Al-Iman, As-Sunnah, Al-Tawheed, Al-Aqidah, Usul al-Din, Al-Sharia, and Al-Fiqh al-Akbar are all names of this field of knowledge. He said, the first of these names to be used is Al-Fiqh al-Akbar. He said, these names are all names of Tawheed and are all well-known Islamically, sound and acceptable. Al-Fiqh al-Akbar was the first name given to what we know as the science of Tawheed. This name was also the first name to be given to Tawheed, first name to be given to a book that talked or discussed Tawheed. So the first book written that talks about Tawheed was given the name Al-Fiqh al-Akbar. What we just mentioned from the words of the author were actually very beautiful. The author mentioned 7 names and called them Shar'iyya Shahira, or well-known Islamic names. This hints to the fact that there may be other names that are not Islamic or are unacceptable, as we will see next lesson, inshallah ta'ala. The first of these names he mentioned is Al-Iman. This is the foremost of these names, as it and the other names derived from it, Al-Iman, Iman, and things that are derived from that same root of Al-Iman, are the most commonly used words in the Quran and the Sunnah. If someone was to wonder why we didn't call this name the first, but we call it the foremost, it's because Al-Fiqh al-Akbar, according to some scholars, was the first name given to this science. Abu Hanifa apparently wrote a book about Tawheed called Al-Fiqh al-Akbar, around which some doubts do exist. Some also say that Al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala wrote a book about Tawheed called Al-Fiqh al-Akbar. However, wallahu alam, many scholars say that that book was not actually written by him. Regardless of which of these 2 names was used first, the term Iman or Al-Iman, which is used to indicate this field of knowledge, was first used in the 2nd Hijri year and has remained in usage until today. Al-Fiqh al-Akbar, on the other hand, is not that commonly used anymore. Abu Hanifa said, Al-Fiqh al-Akbar in ad-Din is better than fiqh in Islamic knowledge, for learning how to worship your Lord is better than gathering much knowledge. This term was once used to mean Aqidah. However, nowadays it is rarely used to mean Aqidah. It's instead used to tell us what is halal and what is haram in regards to our actions, indicating physical rulings that are derived from detailed evidence, as the scholars say. Iman is defined as the belief of the heart, the pronunciation of the tongue, and the actions of the limbs, with the intent of obeying Allah by performing what He has commanded and refraining from that He has forbidden. As-Sunnah was also used by the scholars to describe this great knowledge. It was used at the end of the 2nd century and the start of the 3rd century, Hijri century. Al-Aqidah was also used as a title of this field of knowledge. It was used by the Sahaba to describe Tawheed, such as some statements that go back to Ali radiallahu ta'ala anh and Ibn Abbas, who said, looking at a man from Ahl Sunnah who calls to As-Sunnah and warns from bid'ah is an act of worship. These names were called Islamically correct and well known because they were derived from Islamic sources, and the Salaf used them often. The Salaf used them, making them acceptable and well known titles for this great field of knowledge. As we mentioned, Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anh said, Al-Hawa, or desire, for he who goes against the Sunnah, here meaning correct Aqidah, is true. Even if his head was to roll because of his belief, he was to die because of his belief, he would still believe that his desire is true. We ask Allah to give us great, beneficial Islamic knowledge and to enable us to have correct Tawheed and to bless us with correct Tawheed. These names we mentioned so far are all correct Islamic names for this field of knowledge. Next lesson, inshallah ta'ala, we will look at some of the unacceptable names that were given to this field of knowledge and explain why they are unacceptable and the dangers that could be spread through the community if these names became widespread. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.